Good evening, everyone. I'm Sri Charan and I'm from TAPME Analytics Forum, and we would like to start the next session of Ignite 2020, Connecting Aspirants to Achievers. Today we have with us Ms. Srishti Mittal, Solutions at vPhrase.
Hi,
Srishti ma'am
everyone.
leads solutions at vPhrase and partners with top executives to deploy analytics that solve complex business problems and help gain competitive advantage with data-driven decisions. Besides analytics, her areas of expertise include growth strategy, customer strategy, sales and marketing strategy. Over the last 14 years, she has worked extensively with CXOs of Fortune 100 companies. She closely tracks innovations at the intersection of advanced analytics, artificial intelligence, machine learning, design thinking, and behavioral decision making. She is passionate about helping businesses and technology leaders harness the power of analytics to derive value from data. She is an ISB Hyderabad and VJTI Mumbai alumnus. I hope that through today's session, we can leverage from her practical experiences and insights. Thank you, ma'am, for agreeing to be a part of Ignite 2020. We at TAPME are truly honored to have you amongst us today and are really looking forward to today's session.
Great. Thank you for the lovely introduction and thank you for this opportunity. Actually, when I was thinking of a topic when she approached me and he gave me a complete free terrain that, you just select a topic that you think would be more relevant. And while thinking through the topic, I wanted to ensure two objectives. One was because it's a short duration talk in an hour, I wanted to still cover some practical tips that would be worth your while and something that you can take away with you and use in the years to come. So I wanted to work on that. And second, I was thinking about what is it that I can talk about with complete confidence and credibility in my professional experience. So I realized that decision making and analytical thinking has been the core of my professional experience. And currently, I'm at a place in my career where I can actually reflect back and look at my career from a different perspective and actually look at what has worked, what has not worked, and give back to the community. So I'm quite excited to share with you all young MBA students who are going to be our future managers and professionals. And I hope, while thinking through these topics, one thing that I realized that I would want to share things with you in detail, which I've never really thought of my process, how I go about, working with data analytics and analysts and data scientists. And second thing, please excuse my cough. I have an allergic cough, so it might be there. So I'll just mute in case, it aggravates. So, and I've never gone into such a detail about my process, and it's really interesting to talk about it. And it's the kind of stuff I wish everyone knew because it's really helpful. And I really wish that someone was there early in my career sharing these things because what I'm about to share with you today is not something that you'll find easily in any books or any courses. Nobody actually teaches you these things. And uh, I wish someone had, it would have made a big difference and impact in my career. So I hope you have that, you can take away some really insightful tips basically, or practical hacks to deal in data analytics. So I'll just start my presentation. I'll just share my screen. Is the screen visible?
Yes, ma'am.
Right. So this is the stuff, that I want you to know. And so I'm sharing these secrets actually, literally. I've never told this to anyone about the whole process and things that you'll not find in any books or nobody will teach you. So this, in a way, I'll call it the data analytics playbook for managers who aren't data experts. So in today's world, people get so overwhelmed with, okay, there's so much data analytics. What does it actually mean? Statistical modeling. I should know mathematics. I should know statistics. I should know this. And they get really overwhelmed. And actually, you don't need to. So here are my tricks and tips. So by the end of the talk, let me just, summarize for you what you will learn. you'll actually learn how to the line of questioning that you should take to get the right information for decision making using data. You will also learn what you actually need to know to deal with data scientists and analysts in your team. What are the basics of statistical terms that you need to know? You'll learn what to measure what matters. So how do you identify the right metrics and then decide on the basis of those metrics what decisions you need to take? I'll also talk about some mistakes and traps people make in decision making and what you can do about it. And finally, I'll talk about how you can derive useful insights, actionable insights, to drive action. And of course, if we have more time, I'll talk of a bonus session as to how to work effectively with data scientists because they are this new breed, and most of you might be aspiring to be one. And how managers can, best extract value and collaboratively work with data scientists. So moving on, let's talk about what is every manager's end game. So, like we are all led to believe, and what we do earlier, very early in our careers, it's making PowerPoints. Well, yeah, we do have to do that. It's a very powerful tool as well, but that's not the end game. The end game is making decisions confidently. How? So let's break it down. And I'm talking from brass tacks, like absolute basics. To run a sustainable business, you need to create value for your stakeholders. Who are your key stakeholders? They are your shareholders, your customers, your employees, the overall community. And to create value, you need competitive advantage and you need to make profits. And how do you do that? You need to have a strategy in place. And what is strategy? Strategy is a plan to win. So, like any game, you make choices. It all boils down to choices, that what you should do and what you should not do, what should be your focus. And everything rides on decisions. Why I'm stressing is I want you all to understand the importance of decision making and the impact of decision making. So let's do a simple exercise. This is something, I do even in my basic interviews, the first interviews. So imagine I'm just giving you a problem. It's there on the screen as well, and I'll just read it out for you as well. So imagine you're responsible for managing your company's car fleet. And there are two types of models that you manage. An SUV, which gives you a mileage of 10 kilometer per liter, the other one is sedan, which gives you a mileage of 20 kilometers per liter. And both the fleets have equal number of cars. And on an annual basis, each car runs around 10,000 kilometers. So this is a very simple no trick question. It's a simple question that most managers need to answer. And what you're looking to do is now to replace one of the models with a more fuel efficient vehicles, and you have enough capital for it. So let's assume that you don't have to analyze whether you have the capital or not. And you have to make a decision just based on the data available here. And which is a better upgrade? So the first option is that would you replace the 10 kilometer per liter vehicles with 20 kilometers per liter? Or would you replace the 20 kilometers with a vehicle which provides you 50 kilometers per liter mileage? Take a minute and just, is there an option that they can just put their responses? Yeah, I would just like to see how the students, just put your responses as one or two. What do you think is the correct answer? What should be a better upgrade? Since I cannot see because my thing is on a presentation board, Shri, just let me know once people are done.
Sure, ma'am.
Yeah.
Guys, please put in your responses.
It's just okay. It's just a basic question because, I wanted to be an interactive session and I just wanted to see how people make decisions.
Ma'am, from most of the options, it is option two that dominates.
Great. So shall we move on?
Yes, ma'am.
So we've got all 57 responses.
Yes, ma'am. It's a flurry of option 2, and there's one person who said 10 to 50.
Okay, great. So let's move on. We'll come back to this problem later.
Okay.
And there was a reason why I put that problem there. Oops, sorry. Yeah. So decision making is a process. It's also the toughest and riskiest. Why? Because stakes are usually high. If you make a mistake, then there are financial repercussions to it. It might even, affect your business badly. And the quality of decisions are affected, if you don't take all the alternatives clearly, if you do not have the right information, and you've not weighed your options, the trade-offs that you're going to make. And there are a lot of heuristics and human biases in behavioral thinking that we may, that come into play while we're making a decision, including emotions. So how does analytics help? Actually, in today, analytics is not something new. Analytics is something that people have been using in their business age old. Only with the technology we are able to gather much more data and process it better. But it's nothing new. But without analytics, you are mostly dependent on your senior management's opinion. So while it's a joke here, mostly it's true. So what does analytical method help you with? It helps you test your hypothesis and intuition and finding trends and patterns that aren't so obvious. Like I said, the technology today has made it possible to analyze a lot more data than that was possible humanly earlier. And data science is a relatively new capability because it deals with big data. And interacting in a new data driven culture can be particularly difficult for people who aren't data experts. So it is important, that even if you're dealing with the brightest minds who are analyzing your data, handling your data, it won't make a difference if you don't know what they're doing or what it means. Or, unless you do not know what the right questions you need to ask to make those informed decisions, all you have is a set of numbers. We are talking about data analysis process, and it involves 3 steps. Now I've simplified it because in principle, it actually means these 3 things. One is gathering the right information, making sense of data, and communicating insights for timely action. But before we start into data analytics and how we use, how managers use data analytics, let me first, take a step back and give you a kind of a reminder of know your worth as a manager. What as a manager do you bring to the table and how you can play to your strengths? So if I have to give an analogy, I would say, you are like the neck of the organization. You hold the power to move in which direction the organization needs to look or focus on. And that's a very powerful, you know, thing to have. And how you add value. So as a manager, you have the power of empathy because you understand the need of your customers, your stakeholders. You are managing them all together. It's not the data scientist, it's not your analyst team. You're bringing in the domain expertise. Nobody knows your business segment better than you do. And you know the practical and the realities of the world, not just what data is telling. And because of this, you and your experience, you have already developed an intuition, which will help you in framing the problem. Because unless you do not, so even if you have explorers whom you send on a mission to hunt for treasures, unless you tell them what the treasure is and what you are looking for, there's just no point of that mission. So similarly, framing the problem is very important. And it's critical. And then age old, what managers have been doing, which is their key strength, is creative problem solving. They do that day in, day out. Identifying the hypothesis and relevant variables. Now, this is something I'll talk about more in detail, and it's very important because based on your intuition, your domain expertise, your understanding of your market, you will be the best person to create these hypotheses and what are the relevant factors or variables that will be impacting that problem. At last, accountability of the business impact lies with the managers. No matter what the data experts tell you or recommend, ultimately it's your responsibility and accountability. And the human emotions, because you deal manager's job is to manage people, so they deal with emotions, they deal with qualitative analysis which no data can account for. And at last, this is what is the most powerful, that with all these experiences you develop a business acumen and your judgment matters, because decision making, even though we can automate in a way by putting algorithms, is not as good as what managers can do. So having this precursor and remembering where you add value and not being overwhelmed by statistics, and that we need to know, well, it's important to understand, to speak their language, the data analyst language, but you need to know where the focus lies and what your key end game is. That is decision making. And most importantly, as future leaders, this again follows through that you set the strategy to motivate your team to collectively achieve shared objectives, and you make decisions and are responsible for them. So no matter how intelligent and what the data experts tell you, ultimately you have to make the decision and the responsibility for them is yours. So as we mentioned, the 3 steps, I've kind of created a shortcut in a way of a roadmap of how you can uh, navigate through each step. And the first step is gathering the right information. So there are various kinds of managers and CEOs. Some want their decisions hard rooted into everything that data says. Some like to just test their hypothesis, and there are hybrids as well. So no matter what that is, whenever you are dealing with any problem, you're defining a problem, you first need to see that what would be a source of data. So there are 2 ways. One could be an existing set of data that your normal business course has, or second could be the new data that you can gather through experiments. And that is also a very powerful tool. But as a manager, you have to do a cost benefit analysis as to which is the right medium for you and why. What are the trade offs that you'll be making? Second, you also need to account for risks, and there could be various costs of data, right? It's not cheap to do these analysis. And I'm not just talking about financial costs, I'm also talking about costs in terms of dealing with sensitive data, the ethics behind it, customers' privacy. So a manager needs to account for all that. Moving on to the list of questions. So I've just created a list. Now, a list is something, usually checklist is a matter of discipline. It's nothing genius about it. But if you just adhere to it partially, then it's a recipe for failure. So ensure that at least, as you use this as a checklist, that are you asking the right questions? Because many a times, unless you define the question, what happens is you tend to work with whatever exists, right? You don't really go with the data you really need. So first step should be to define your question and the problem. Be clear and be very specific of your objectives. Next comes, how do you obtain data? So like I had mentioned, you know, the cost benefit analysis, whether you'll go for collecting new data through experiments. This is a very powerful tool, but it's expensive, and basically you need to invest in it, but it gives you sometimes direct causations, whereas data compiled by the company through normal course of business actually just gives you correlations. So you need to learn to know the difference between the two and deal with the data accordingly. Then, of course, you need to know in what format the data is available, whether it's structured or unstructured. Structured data, of course, is your data which can be, put in any structured format, like in rows and columns. Unstructured data actually needs further investment. So you need to weigh those options as well. And not just limited to that, you also need to check whether the data is incomplete or inaccurate, then you need to account for that. Sometimes the data is incomplete, actually most of the time. In that case, you need to look out for alternative data sources. Since that's another big area that we could have discussed, I'm not covering it in this talk today. Then we talk about, is the model too complicated? Now remember, all statistical models are wrong actually, because they just simplify real life situations, right? But you need to know whether it really applies to your problem and your framework of the situation that you're dealing with, and your data supports it. Does your data tell a story? So many a time, like I mentioned, data is available in very fragmented forms. And then based on your key questions and your objectives, is this data enough, and is it able to tell you the entire story that you are looking out for as a solution? And then most of the data available helps us look into the past, what has happened, rather than looking ahead. So, I mean, and there's nothing wrong with it, but then you are always in a reactive mode. And if you want to be ahead of the curve and have a competitive advantage, it's always best to look for data that helps you look ahead. And I mean, no data alone, quantitative or qualitative alone, can help you arrive to a good solution. You need to have a good mix of quantitative and qualitative data. For example, if you know which are your best selling products, you also need to know why they are selling. And then I was talking about the right metrics. So measure what really matters. So most of the times you can't pick your data. You have to deal with what is available, but you can pick your metrics. And it's very crucial for managers. Here, their role comes and they make a big difference. So what you measure is what you manage. So differentiate between vanity metrics and meaningful metrics. Now, what I mean by vanity metrics and meaningful metrics, it is completely dependent on that organization, or even for that matter, on that problem. I can give you an example of an NGO who was trying to promote and raise funds for local artisans, handicraft artisans. And they had compiled a beautiful video and put it live on YouTube to promote that fundraising. And that video went viral. It had 4 million hits within the first 3 days. Now that seems like a success, right? But for this objective, it was a vanity metrics, right? Because at the end of the week, when they tried to just accumulate that what were the funds that they raised, it was not more than 20,000 rupees, which was way less than what they were expecting. So you need to think about it from brass tacks. Don't focus on what are the key KPIs. These are the typical ones. Usually they are correct, but think of your situation specifically, and based on that, identify the good metrics. Now, a good metrics should have three attributes. The data should be consistent. It should be cheap and easily accessible, and it should be quick to collect so that you can do your analysis on a regular basis. So, as a thumb rule, if you can't measure certain results within a week for free, then you're prioritizing the wrong ones. And this is on a regular basis. I'm talking about the metrics. Now, moving on to what making sense of data. Once you've gathered your right information, you need to make sense of your data. So, what do you actually need to make sense of data? I think what would help for non-data experts is to develop an appreciation for analytics. They need to learn the basics. So they don't need to know what exactly that mathematical calculation is, but they need to understand the applications of the models and which is the right model for what situation. And the best way to do that is to ask questions. Ask as many questions you need to clarify, your doubts. Some of the basic terms that I would say and concepts that you should really know is regression analysis, statistical inference, and experimental design. I think if you cover these three basics, you basically cover almost 80% of what you need to know and what really happens with data analytics. Regression analysis is like the very basic and go to medium or a model that is used. It helps you, to know which factors matter the most, what factors you can ignore, how do these factors, interrelate or how dependent they are on each other. And most importantly, it actually tells you, how certain you are of these factors. So similarly, for statistical inference and experimental design, A/B testing, these are things that you need to know because you will be, as managers, you will be, asking your analytics team to design problems. Once you tell them the questions and the problem statement, once you frame the problem, you'll be asking them to work on that. Second, I think it helps to kind of structure. So everything, if managers have a structured thinking and can put things on framework, it helps them, make it a process, and it helps in systems thinking. So that is how I work. That's my process usually. It helps reduce, ad hoc work that is required by managers to do, or anything, where they're trying to reinvent the wheel. So if you understand the process of making analytics decisions, it will help. And even in this process, I will just help you guide where you need to focus. Another important aspect is each of these models are based on certain assumptions, and you need to always question these assumptions. You need to ask and just see whether it fits the real life situation or whether it's still applicable. A simple example would be, if you're using analytics to kind of identify defaulters in loan payments, right? So you have a model in place and a certain assumption. But given the current COVID situation, many people have lost their jobs. So you need to redefine those assumptions and factors. You just can't use the same model again. So there again, you need to question. And then ask the right questions. I can't emphasize enough on how much the value these questions bring in. The simple questions that you ask makes a lot of things clear. It brings a lot of clarity of thought. And then I'll talk about obviously the common traps that people make in decision making. So this is fairly a simple 6-step process that you make in analytical decision making. Just give me a minute. So framing a problem, recognize the problem and framing the problem is the key, and it is where your business experience and intuition matters the most. And then once you move ahead, you review. So you see if somebody else has tried to solve this problem and whether they were able to find a good solution or whether it's a good match for your situation or not. It is always helpful to see what their approaches were and what their mistakes were. Then you can decide on a model, which should be a simple model. Always ask yourself, so what, and demand more analysis wherever possible. Get a feel for variation. Understanding variation leads to a better feel of the overall problem. It gives you deeper insights and it gives you new ideas for improvement. Then these are very standard steps. But then again, the last step, how you present your data, how you arrive at your insights also matter. So that's again where, you need to be very careful about. Of course, the steps in between is a collaborative process with your analytics team. Now coming to the traps. So I'm really happy to see that most of you answered the correct answer, Okay, I was just joking. So the correct answer is 1. And here's why. Just let me walk you through it. The correct answer is replacing 10 kilometer per liter with a 20 kilometer.
Ma'am, can I tell the reason, ma'am, why 1?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, ma'am, my name is Krishna. I wanted to type one, but I'm unable to send my chat here.
Oh, okay.
So my reason is it will be very expensive to make a 20 kilometers to 50 kilometers mileage. We need to put an extra special system so that the consumption of fuel is minimized so much. And second is the price will be much more unbearable for people who are going to buy it. And 10 kilometers to 20 kilometers is too less for a car to have a mileage unless it is some Mercedes Benz class or whatever. So 20 kilometers I think is an optimal. So I think in the optimization point of view, 10 making 10 into 20 is a good idea, ma'am.
So, Krishna, you're quite right in certain aspects, and I'll tell you, you covered the reasoning. So, I am totally coming from the analytics perspective of it, while you've also mentioned on to practicalities of things, right? If you are making a machine which is from 20 to 50, then of course the price aspects come to it. But because it was a controlled environment and the way I had defined the thing, even if I had told you that upgrading from 20 to 100, still the first would have been the correct answer. And what I wanted to highlight here was why, because this is a usually how we solve problems is we talk about linear relationships. While this is a non-linear, and I would have loved to present it into a chart, which I should have done now. Now that I think about it, but let me just walk you through it. So if you just talk about petrol use per 10,000 kilometers. So currently, if you see in the first scenario where you have 10 kilometers per liter car vehicles, you use 1,000 liters, right? And in the second, where 20 kilometers, you use 500 liters. But if you upgrade to 20 kilometers, you are saving 500 liters, right? Because after upgrade, you're using only 500 liters. The 1,000 minus 500 is 500, which is your savings. Whereas if you're using 500 and when you upgrade, you're using only 200 liters, you're still saving only 300. That is again because it's a linear problem. So here what happens is, so no matter what, even if you take it up to 200 kilometers per liter, right? Still you'll not be saving enough as much you would be saving in the first scenario. But choosing the lower mileage upgrade remains counterintuitive, right? And it is one of the mistakes that we make as managers, because our human mind, there are certain fallacies, even the behavioral scientists and psychologists have also come across. And I wanted to just highlight that this is one of those things, and how you can overcome such and this is applicable not just in this scenario, it is also applicable like in profits. So when you look at profits, everybody knows that profit is a function of price, costs and volume, right? But still everybody focuses on reducing costs or increasing volumes, right? We need to get more customers in. But price is where you need to play the best, because even slight increase in price will give you much more profits compared to what you'll cover in volumes or saving costs. So here, in a way, Krishna, you are right where you said the marginal value wherein that thing comes in. So again, it's a function of curve. So if I'm talking purely from mathematics and analytics point of view, what I'm saying is human mind struggles to understand non-linear relationships. And one of the ways to overcome this is to be cognizant of such a problem. A similar example, if I have to give, is of your internet bandwidth. The way companies take advantage of people when they say, you can improve your uh, from 16 Mbps to 50 Mbps, and then they talk about 50 to 150 Mbps. Jio's been, giving those plans, but how they price it is very linearly, right? So from 16 to 50, if you are upgrading, and from 50 to 150, they'll price the same way. But the benefits you will get, the time savings you will get in downloads is marginally less, So again, because it's a linear function. Or similarly, when you take a loan and you take it for a tenure of 10 years or 15 years, you'll realize in the first 5 6 years your actual loan payment is very less, because that's how it's designed, again linearly. What they're first extracting from you is their interest. So as managers, you need to be very cognizant of this problem. So similarly, if I talk about I'm sorry, this is not the slide that I was hoping to do here. One sec. Yeah. So let's talk about the psychological traps, that we make as humans in decision making. And I've highlighted 8 over here. And these are very common traps. And let's just take a time check. So we have time. Okay. So let me just talk about examples for each of these. The anchoring trap. Now, people also take advantage of this anchoring trap, and I think most of you will learn in negotiations as well that once you put an anchor. So, for example, if I tell you, if I ask you a question of what is the population of is the population of Turkey um 40 million people, 40 million, and then I ask you, okay, what is the population of Turkey? I can guarantee you that maximum people will, just anchor it around 40 million and talk about it. Or a live example would be how sales teams, when they are doing their projections for next year, they just rely on the previous year volume sales and they'll just increase it by, 10% or a marginal amount, uh, mentioning that they are very data savvy. But actually, they're not accounting for the market situation. They're not accounting if new products are launched by competitors. So again, this is an anchoring trap. The best way to overcome this is to look from various perspectives. And for the first thing, if you're even aware of these type of traps now, it helps because then you think that am I falling into one of these traps or not? And second is, you need to have an open mind and look from various perspectives. First, think of the problem, like I mentioned, first frame your questions without referring it to anyone else, and then ask others for advice. The status quo trap. So if you see, one of the examples would be like in the early days, when there were e-papers, they were exact replica of what the printed papers were. But that was not an efficient way of reading on the net, right? It was just because, people just go with, what's not broken and is working, let's just continue with it. They don't really think about it. And basically what happens is it kind of probes them to take action, right? And if they take action, they are accountable for it. So mostly people have this bias that jo chal raha hai, chalne do achhe se, unless, they don't look for better alternatives. And many a times, the biggest problem with the status quo trap is it kind of uh, so we don't take decisions because of it. We just postpone our decision making, and that is also a decision actually. And most of the times, it has negative repercussions because taking decisions in time is one of the most important things. So one way to look at the status quo trap is always ask yourself that if this was not the status quo and this situation was there, would I still choose this as an alternative? If yes, then great, continue with it. If no, then what would be a better alternative? Look for it. The sunk cost trap is again something we all uh, basically face in our life. It's the first thing because here we kind of have to accept for our mistake. I've already invested so much time in this. For example, if I hire someone and I know it's not a good hire, I will keep training that person. I will try and give them chances because I've already invested so much time and effort in hiring that person and training that person. But then that's a sunk cost. Or for that matter, so many decisions we make. So if you see, if sunk cost to overcome something like a sunk cost trap is also one thing that you can always say is if this was not the scenario, if I was not invested, would I still be continuing with this scenario or this results? If not, then you are again in the sunk cost trap and you should move on from that. Confirmation bias is something when you're dealing with data analytics, you need to be very cognizant of because what happens is it's human nature that we tend to be attracted to confirm something that we are inclined to. Usually when we make decisions, there is systems one thinking and systems two thinking. And system one means, is our unconscious, subconscious mind which makes decisions. System two is, when we consciously think about things. And confirmation bias usually, helps us to move towards a system one thinking wherein, our initial gut says this is the answer. yes, this is the decision. And then we just try to look for data that confirms that for us. And we tend to ignore if something, if data says something otherwise. So what we need to do is to be obviously aware of the situation. We need to also look into, we also need to, test uh, both sides and all the evidence rigorously, not just the ones that is supporting to what we feel like is the right answer. Second, we need to also, in the confirmation bias, play the devil's advocate. That helps. Either you go for someone whom you trust and respect to play that role for you, or you yourself look into it. So that's how you can overcome confirmation bias. Talking about the framing trap. Now, this is also a very interesting one. It is about how you frame the problem. And since I've talked about how important it is for managers to frame the problem, so here, I'll talk about a simple thing like we as humans tend to give much more importance to losses than gains. If I have to give you a kind of a example of, yeah, so I just read this adoption of eye donation, right, by states. Now this was a US case. So one of the states, they made it, how did they frame their questionnaire, when people were signing up? So one, they said, one state made it a default option that yes, if you have not said otherwise, your eyes are available for donation after your death. But the other state made it an option for you to, that you need to sign in and only then it will be applicable. Now this is a way of framing the same thing in two ways, right? But because of our status quo trap, the first option, 80% of the people were automatically have donated their eyes because they didn't bother to change, look for a change and do it. While in the second scenario, only 25% in that state opted to donate their eyes. So that's how I'm saying that how it makes a big impact in how you frame your problem. Now, similarly, if we talk about the overconfidence tap or prudence tap, so many a times, if we have a lot of data available, our estimates. So we are good as humans in estimating things we do on every day. So, if we know the distance or something that we've done time and again. But when it comes to making estimates or forecasts about business decisions, we need to have, first of all, a lot of experience in it. We need to do a lot of experiments and learn from those. Otherwise, we always fall for an overconfidence trap because we think we have a lot of data. And it also depends on how risk averse you are or how risk taking you are. So some people who are risk averse, they will fall into the prudence trap. They'll be overcautious. And if you are someone who takes risks and you have a lot of data, you'll be overestimating your forecast. Because at the end of the day, whatever decisions or predictions you're making, they are still guesses, which are based on these models. Again, the recallability trap is something, what happens is something, a very dramatic event that has happened. And it was so dramatic for you or for that business that you feel that it has more significance. And I'm talking about statistical significance than this thing. So every time you feel, no, it might happen, you feel the probability of it happening again is more, while it might not be the case. So I've just covered briefly. But overall, if I have to talk about how you can avoid some tips to avoid these traps, is first and foremost familiarize yourself with all these biases and heuristics. Avoid, any types of, so as I said, ask questions, avoid complexity and confusion, and always see, we tend to collect a lot more data than we need. And of course, it has financial repercussions also because data storage is expensive. But other than that, do we actually need all that data? It's just confusing. Understand the model. Like I mentioned, you don't need to understand how to run the model, but you need to know the application of the model and whether it fits your situation. Again, I'm just kind of repeating it again and again because this is important and this will actually help you. You need to ask you the key assumptions. And most importantly, do not let your data replace your intuition. People always say now that people rely on their intuition and gut, especially if you have experience in something like this. So then it matters. You must have heard of the 10,000 rule that Malcolm Gladwell has, that, if you've done something for 10,000 hours, then you are likely to be an expert in that skill. So if you've done something for more than 10,000 hours, like I have actually built in the last 8 years, the Fortune 100 CXOs for developing strategies and how they should be making decisions or developing solutions for them. So then, in a way, my intuition for those businesses would be a little better because I've learned from experience. So this intuition is actually valuable, and managers should learn to hone this intuition. And it is not intuition versus data. Actually, if you see, statistics can be explained through intuition. In fact, you should overlay your intuition on top of the data. Does it really make sense? I'll give you an example of an experiment that was done in the 1990s. It was with the Pittsburgh University, and they were trying to predict the mortality rate of pneumonia back then. And they had developed a very sophisticated algorithm, which in a way was predicting that if you have pneumonia and if you've had asthma, then you can send those patients home because they're safer, much safer compared to others who have pneumonia. Now it's very counterintuitive, right? It doesn't make sense because with asthma then and having pneumonia seems to be a much more dangerous combination, right? But what that algorithm failed to see was people who had asthma were already in ICU right before they had pneumonia, and they were, they were taken care of in a better way, and they had those immunity, with that care that they have. So again, if it has to be your intuition, you have to see whether it fits the situation or not. Otherwise, data is like garbage in, garbage out in a way also. And if something does not make sense, ask questions. See whether the data was right, if there was a large error that was made. And then I want to talk about outliers. Outliers is also something, which are spikes or sudden anomalies. And they tend to, kind of completely change the game if you're looking at a solution. And you just need to investigate the anomalies. There are three options how you can deal with anomalies. One is to just ignore them, that it might be a one-off case. Second is to change or kind of delete it, which is a rare scenario you would do. I'll give you an example. I was analyzing some data for a call center, and they were having sudden spikes of customer complaints, and the time to resolve those complaints was much longer. And this had happened in the past 2 months. If we are looking at a quarterly data, it was reflecting only in the past 2 months. And the manager in charge kind of presented the data in such a way, mentioning that we have a resource problem, which is why and the waiting time is long for the customers, which is why the customer satisfaction levels are going down, and the customers are taking much and the employees are taking much longer time in the call center to resolve these problems. But this was a big spike, and if you actually investigate further into the anomaly, it was not actually a resource problem. It was a problem wherein, so this was for a bank, and these segment of people who were, spiking up were the people who had retired most recently, and they were the ones who needed help with their entire portfolio. So obviously, the processing time was more, and they needed some special assistance for it. So they not every call center employee could actually address their problems, which is why these are all live examples I'm trying to give you. So by asking a few questions, that so was it collected in a different way or at a different time, or was something different about the segments? These were the 2 3 questions that were asked, and with that we could get into the bottom of the problem, what it was, then what it was presented or being envisaged. So that is how something you can overcome, the problems and these traps when you're making decisions. And lastly, communicating insights. So I have this team of data analysts and business analysts, and every time they are coming up with some solutions or reports, I always ask them, so what is the so what of this insight that you've developed? What do I do with it? Why are you doing it? Is it important? Does it have a significance? So if I talk about one thing that you always, and I know people have talked about storytelling and visualization and data storytelling for so often, but what it actually means, that when you're communicating a problem, think about it like you make case studies, right? So so you talk about that this was the problem, this was the hypothesis that we developed for this to solve this problem, this was the data we referred to, these were the findings, and this was the business impact, like in any case study that we built. So this is a good way of storytelling because people relate to it. If you talk about this was the model I used, this was the p value, this was the significance, people just lose interest and they don't really know what you're talking about. So you need to know your audience and shape your data storytelling accordingly. Again, for some, visualization is a powerful medium, some prefer reports. And what matters most is the emotional connect. Is it a memorable story for them? Is it relevant to them? And is it in the right context? So that is what I mean by communicating. And then coming to the insight. So another important thing is, what is your takeaway from all this solution and analysis that you've done? Is it providing you a new input, something that you didn't know, which was not very obvious, something which is useful for you? You can take action out of it. So again, so what do I do with it? Is it useful for me? Because it might tell me something which is interesting to know, but is it significant enough for me to take certain action? Was it worth the analysis costs that I invested in? Is it contextual and relevant to my business and my problem and my situation? And then it always needs to be measurable, because you are talking about data, right? And deriving insights from the data. So if you can't measure it, then it'll be a problem. And lastly, it needs to be consistent and stable and reliable. It can't be a one-off case. Again, then it'll be an outlier and an anomaly. So you need to see that it is based on facts and a good set of data, a trustworthy set of data, and communicate accordingly. So even with data experts crunching the numbers, as I mentioned, I'm reiterating that the responsibility of decision making lies with you. And take the example of Akbar. He was one of the most loved Mughal kings. He was illiterate, and yet he had a whole team of Navratnas, right, including Birbal, who were very smart people. And how did he still pull it off and ran a whole kingdom? It is all by collaboratively working with these people and asking the right questions and clarity of thought. So let's talk about data scientists and dealing with them. They are highly intelligent and trained professionals. They are curious people, and they know how to work well with big data. They help you make sense of your data, manage large volumes of it, and help you find insights. So it is very important for future managers to work collaboratively with them, trust them, and work very closely with them. While it's a joke, a data analyst is a business analyst who lives in California. But data scientists today are also becoming very smart, and they are also trying and understanding the business. But remember, nobody understands the business and the intuition that you can bring for your business as a manager. So when working with data analysts, you need to keep these things in mind. You need to be very clear about what you hope to achieve. There should be no room for ambiguity. I'll give you an example. For instance, so if you ask your data scientist that how do we best utilize ads to increase sales? So there's nothing wrong with this question, right? It's a good question. But then, was that your actual objective? Because most businesses' objective is not to increase sales, but it is to maximize profits. So if you ask them the right question that, I need to use ads to maximize my profits, then the answer they'll come up with, I'll give you an example for a baby products company we were working with. And So if you just want to increase sales for ads, then there'll be a different set of ads that will be run, right? And an A/B testing would be done. But if you're talking about increasing profits, then the price sensitivity was observed that first-time parents are willing to pay more for baby products, and that is how you can maximize your products, and you can push your premium products. So you see the difference; it's slight difference, but it makes such a big impact. So that is why it is very important to be very clear. It is very important to be very specific. You need to sit and collaborate with them. So when you're defining your problem, framing your problem, the right set of questions, you should also sit and explain to them the reasoning why you're coming with those hypotheses, with those factors. You should ask them if they have enough data or what else do they need. And you remember that you have to enable them to kind of service you, because you have to extract the best value out of them. If you're investing so much in a data scientist, and data scientists are not cheap, so that is why I kept a separate section, just to explain to you why it's important and how you should be working effectively with data scientists. Here's a list of smart questions again, because I always think if you ask the right questions, that is the best way to bring clarity of thought and make decisions. And so I'll just leave you with another checklist here, and you can go through it. It's fairly simple. It also talks about all the things that I've already covered, so it's nothing new here. And few things that you should keep in mind. So many a times these new managers, they think data analytics is magic. They'll bring some kind of predictions which will be very very accurate because of the algorithms and models, and they just trust it blindly. So don't do that, because you are the one who's defining the problem. You understand whether it fits into the situation or not. So do not pressure. Again, the first thing I'm talking about is confirmation bias. See if you can find evidence to support this. This is the worst way of getting data scientists to work for you, because again, you are feeding into your confirmation bias, and you're actually not looking for the truth. You are just looking to confirm your intuition. And then don't boil the ocean. Ensure you get the right data. You are responsible for getting the right data to your data scientists, and consider the cost and the trade-off for it. Don't ask them to just analyze all or identify the factors, because if you're asking them to identify the factors, then there's no need for you as a manager, and you're doing a very poor job for managing your business and asking someone else to analyze the factors for you. It's your job to provide these ones, because because you have that business acumen and intuition in place, and what do you suspect might be the factors affecting. And also, the fourth point is important, that don't ask them to look at every possible variable, because sometimes you'll find very funny relationships coming up which don't really exist, and you'll be surprised, because they are working with models, and models tend to have errors. So you need to know, you need to be aware of this. Like I mentioned, you need to know which is the right model that fits in. You also need to know the limitations of each model and the assumptions that go into these models. So if I talk about key takeaways from this, and if you can take away only three things, I would talk about always push for greater clarity of thought, because in decision making, the more clarity of thought you have, the more clear you are and aware of your biases, the better decision making you'll make. And always balance science of analytics with the art of intuition, because you have that power and you are designed as managers to do that. And then strive to find the truth. That is the best way how you can utilize data. You can test your hypothesis and look for patterns that are not easily available to you. So with this, that, like I mentioned, it's your job to think. It's their job to process and analyze things, but as managers, it is your job to think. And I hope with this, and I'm open to questions as well, and you have, but I hope this has helped you take away a few tips and hacks as to how you can deal with data analytics and make better decisions. But now, if I'm talking about just decision making, couple of things I also want to stress on is that you need to also be cognizant that at the end of the day, decision making is also a guesswork. It is based on certain science, yes, but ultimately it's a guess. And decision making might be right. Your process of decision and your decision might be right, but it could have an adverse outcome as well. So most of the times what happens is, if there is 80% probability of success and 20% of failure, and if unfortunately you are in that 20% of a failure, your whole so you are actually being punished as managers for taking that decision, while your decision making was not wrong. It's just how it turned out. The outcome was in that 20% probability bracket. So just be aware of that. Don't stress over decision making. And decision making is again a science, Even today, I cannot confidently say I am still learning how to make better decisions. So it will take time, but I hope at least this will help expedite and act as a catalyst to make better decisions. I'm open to any questions anybody has.
Guys, you may unmute yourself to ask a question or put it in the chat window.
Hello, ma'am. I have a question. Like, am I audible?
Yes, Mohammed.
Yeah, yes, ma'am. Like, how do these data analysts? I mean, data analysts, they do the predictions for the future as well, right, ma'am?
Yes.
Yeah. Like, how do they do that based on the previous some data that they have, and they do the future predictions with those data, right?
Right.
Yeah. My question is like, for example, we came up with the new, COVID scenarios, because most of them didn't predict that COVID is something that some external factors that going to affect. In that case, how they will go for the future predictions? Because nobody had the past scenarios, data that they have, they have impacted with such kind of COVID scenarios,
So, Mohammed, in a way, you've answered your question yourself, because prediction models only work when they are contained in itself and the data in itself, the frame is there. So like you mentioned, nobody could have accounted for COVID. It is an anomaly which came up, right? So you couldn't have accounted for it. So it was not a good, it's not a good problem to be solved by predictive modeling. So there are certain things that work. Like I said, you need to see the right fit of models that are. So if I have to say, whether a customer will click or whether he'll buy, that is a good predictive model. But if I have to kind of analyze that, if I launch a new product and what its sales would be, that is not a good predictive model, because it is dependent on a lot of things, right? On a lot of external data and a lot of external factors which I do not have control of. So similarly, COVID as a situation was not something that you could have predicted for. A predictive model wouldn't work for it. But there are certain models in risk modeling where you could have accounted for something of this sort, a pandemic that you can account for. So these are different factors, like I mentioned. So you can account for this. I hope I'm making sense and I've answered your question.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I got it. Thank you, ma'am.
Anybody else? I've not seen the chat actually.
Hi, ma'am. I'm Maulya. I have, like you said, we are supposed to redefine the features for modeling for credit-based lending after this COVID scenario. So actually, me and Charan are actually doing a project right now regarding that. So it is really difficult to gather the data regarding that. So I did not know how in real business world the data is actually collected without bias. So
Right.
yeah.
So again, you'll have to think of a lot of factors. You'll have to create a lot of different types of hypotheses and test them here again to even build a model. I'm just trying to say. So for instance, if you're doing for a certain area, if you're doing for India, you will also look into, government data wherein you might know how many people have actually lost their jobs. And even in those scenario, who are those people? So what are the various segments? So you'll have to segment that data and again test everywhere, right? So if it is for a segment, so for example, if people below a certain a certain salary have lost their jobs, but they might not be the people who might be going for these kind of loans. So you have to match that way. So it's a very complex problem. I'm just giving you a very simple kind of ideas how you should think about it and what you need to do when you go further. But you have to kind of create multiple hypotheses and find the correlations between them and then build your model on it.
Okay, ma'am. Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay. Any other questions?
Ma'am, regarding the fleet question, we have a message from Shaunak.
Yeah.
It reads, if that question had 10 to 50 as one of the options, then that option would have been the correct one, right? That's his statement.
Yes, Shaunak, you're right.
Ma'am, looks like we don't have any more questions. And with the interest of time, I would now like to hand it over to Kirti to deliver vote of thanks.
Sure.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, ma'am, and good evening, sir. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Srishti ma'am and Neerav sir on behalf of TAPME and all the students present here for sharing your valuable insights. It was pleasure interacting with you and learning about the different facets of data analytics for managers and how managers can make use of it for making decisions with confidence. You first spoke about how data analytics impacts decision making. You delved into the concepts with a very simple exercise and triggered our thoughts. Then you explained about how data analytics can be used to test a hypothesis and come to conclusions using trend analysis and many things. And you then spoke of various stages of analytics like gathering the right information from the right sources, making proper sense of the data, and communicating the proper insights. You then gave an insight about the concepts of regression analysis, statistical inference, experimental design, and also took us through the 6-step process of making analytical decisions. And then you introduced us to the common traps that usually we uh, uh, go through when we perform data analytics, such as because human minds always struggle to understand the non-linear relationships and other psychological decision-making traps like the anchoring trap, the status quo trap, and sunk cost trap. Then you gave us a few tips on how to avoid some of these traps by familiarizing with the biases and heuristics and investigating the issue properly. And you explained all these concepts with some of the examples, real or live examples, which you have dealt with. You then spoke of the importance of communicating the findings of what from whatever we have analyzed and all these insights for timely action and about using the storytelling methods and the visual models so as to deliver it effectively. Ma'am, you then concluded by saying that it's very important to push for a greater clarity of thought and to strive to find the truth. Thank you for patiently answering our questions. We hope to interact with you again in the future. Thank you for taking time out and joining us today. A special word of mention to Professor Esodindra, the TAPME Analytics Forum, the CCT, and the corporate engagement team for making this possible. I would like to thank Dr. Savita and other students of Manipal Institute of Management for joining us today. Hope you all had a lovely day. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you once more.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm really honored and thank you for giving your valuable time here.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you,
Okay.
ma'am.
Bye.
Bye, ma'am. Have a nice day.
You too. Thank you.
Students, can you please stay? Just want a confirmation regarding the attendance.